Hi everyone and welcome back to the FPL Family YouTube channel. I'm Sam and today we're going to talk about captains for Gameweek 23. Now Gameweek 23 on paper actually looks quite a tough one to pick out a captaincy option from. There are some teams with good games but they haven't necessarily had the best form, or we've got teams that have got good form that haven't necessarily got the best games. And of course we have players away at AFCON, so that takes out the likes of Salah, who we may have wanted to captain this week against Crystal Palace. And we have other areas of uncertainty, such as the massive amount of problems that they have at Burnley right now, and therefore what that implications might be in terms of their game against Arsenal at the weekend, because Arsenal looks like a potentially nice captaincy option if you look at some of their players. So let's start then by having a little look at the fixtures this weekend as they stand. Now currently we haven't had any announcements about the postponed matches, and therefore we can go into this video with the assumption that it is going to be a single game week, and therefore these are the 10 fixtures that we have on offer this time around. Now this graphic as always comes from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. If you are not a member at Fantasy Football Scout, there is currently a 7-day free trial on. Head over there and have a little look. There is a link in the description below. So when we have a little look at this table, then we can see that at the top we have a few clubs who on paper have the nicest fixture this week and therefore could offer us with good captaincy options. If we start them right at the top, we have Watford. They are due to play Norwich this weekend. Now of course we did see a little bit of bounce from Norwich last time around, but I think that was more to do with Everton than it was to do with Norwich. Obviously Watford were due to play in midweek this week, but their game against Burnley was postponed due to a lack of player availability at Burnley. If we have a little think about who we could captain at Watford, I mean, these aren't necessarily the sort of players that you would regularly look to captain, because they are, for the most part, they are nice cheap enablers who are doing a great job in our team. So the likes of Dennis and King wouldn't normally be the sort of players that would appear in a captaincy video unless they had a double game week. But with a game against Norwich, there is potential there if you want to go a bit more rogue with your captaincy picks this week. Dennis has 5 returns since game week 12 and only 3 blanks in that period too. Of course, as I mentioned, they were due to play in midweek. That game postponement means that he has had a little bit of a rest this week. He is second for influence amongst forwards in the game and 9th for creativity, so is doing all the right things. It just, I don't know, for me, captaining Dennis or captaining the likes of King just feels, well, it feels a little bit out there, but maybe with the way this season's been going, a little bit of an out there captaincy shout might not be such a bad idea. Underneath Watford then we have Arsenal, second on the fixture ticker for this game week against Burnley. Now I already mentioned in that introduction that potentially we've got some issues there. We obviously have seen Burnley have their last couple of fixtures called off as a result of problems in the squad and being able to get out a team. Whether or not they will be able to rectify those problems enough by the time this game against Arsenal is due to be played on Sunday remains to be seen, and we'll kind of wait for news on that. But we'll go into this video assuming that that game is going to go ahead. Now obviously Arsenal have been playing quite well lately, and if we have a think about who we could captain within that Arsenal team, Lacazette for me is the standout option there. Has returned in 3 of the last 5 games that he's played in the Premier League. They will have Partey back, so any issues that they had as a result of not being able to fulfil a squad in the North London derby should be resolving themselves now with him returning from the African Cup of Nations early. But again, it just goes back to that Burnley conundrum. There's other players in that Arsenal team that you can maybe look towards as well. Of course, there's players like Martinelli or Odegaard if you own them. I don't think you're going to necessarily want to bring these players in, however, though, because of course, whilst they play in 23 and 24, they will then blank in 25. So you just need to have a plan and a strategy for what you're going to do with your Arsenal players if you go in on them this time around. But I do think Lacazette has got some potential this time around to be a decent captaincy option. A little bit further down then we have Leeds. Now at Leeds it's a very, very short conversation. It's a really nice fixture against Newcastle. Although Newcastle are doing business in the transfer window and they are strengthening their side in the right places. They've obviously brought in Trippier and Woods, so that should add some defensive solidity with Trips, and of course attacking potential with both of those because Chris Wood is a good proven Premier League forward. And of course, Trippier has that attacking threat, is on set pieces as well. So I don't think this is going to be an easy game for Leeds, but Rafinha would be the one that I would go to if I was going to captain a Leeds player this weekend. He's the most consistent, and whilst he wasn't the one big hauling last time around, he is always there and thereabouts, and his underlying stats are definitely the most impressive across that Leeds side. We have a little bit of a look further down that list then. We see Manchester City. They've got a nice game on paper against Southampton. This game ended 0-0 in the reverse of their fixture back in game week 5. And there are a number of players that I think you could captain from the Manchester City team this time around. Obviously, there's Kevin De Bruyne, returned from injury, was out for a while, wasn't he? But since then has returned in 4 of the last 6 games, including 2 double-digit hauls in that period of time as well as a goal and all 3 bonus points against Chelsea in game week 22. For me, he was the height of impressive and to be honest, it was like watching the KDB of old. And he would be the sort of player that I would want to captain week upon week in seasons gone by. So seeing a game against Southampton, on paper that looks nice. He's in form and Manchester City are performing well. So he looks to me at the moment to be the standout captaincy option across the game week. There are other players across that Manchester City team that you could captain. However, of course, there's Phil Foden, has double-digit hauls in 2 of his last 4 Premier League matches for Manchester City. And Cancelo has returned in 4 of the last 5 matches that he's played, including 2 double-digit hauls. And, of course, that aforementioned clean sheet against Southampton back in game week 5. So all 3 of those making decent captaincy options this time around. Finally, a little bit further down then, there's Liverpool against Crystal Palace. Now, the reverse of this fixture, again back in game week 5, Crystal Palace travelled up to Anfield. They lost the game 3-0. Trent was missing that day, didn't play, but he has returns in every game since game week 15 bar 1. So he is being really, really consistent. He's top across the board within the ICT index for defenders this season. Liverpool had a comfortable result against Crystal Palace last time around, and I suspect that they might do the same this time, even without the likes of Salah and Mane. I still suspect that Liverpool will be on fantastic form. Now, of course, we do have a big game this evening for Salah in the African Cup of Nations, so let's see whether he progresses to the next round. But I think Liverpool will do well this weekend, and the likes of Trent and Jota could be nice captaincy options. But there isn't a huge amount of standout picks. Manchester City are the standout club for captaincy options. Outside of that, of course, we have West Ham and Manchester United playing each other. Neither of those are particularly attractive fixtures for the other one. So the likes of Ronaldo, Bruno, Antonio, they don't look like hugely impressive captaincy options there. Spurs versus Chelsea, again, that's a difficult game to call. If Spurs can improve and get some of their defenders back on the back of, missing them for the last couple of weeks, then hopefully we'll see a better performance from Spurs this time around than we did in the second and first rounds of the League Cup semi-final. Otherwise, it's kind of slim pickings when it comes to captaincy options this week. Of these players, I think for me, I'll be looking at a Manchester City player and potentially even Cancelo this week. I do think he could be a really nice captaincy option. However, there is a little bit of potential for a double game week this time around, and it would be amiss of me not to just mention this in a captaincy video just in case something changes. Now, Lego Mane, who is one of the gods of this kind of stuff, he is somebody that I always look at to work out what's going to happen or potentially what might happen, and therefore what might inform my planning. Now, what Lego Mane is saying in this chart here is that as it stands, there is potential for 2 games to be rescheduled into the FA Cup 4th round weekend. So in theory, we could see Aston Villa and Leeds being rescheduled in there, and also Watford and Burnley. That's because those teams are out of the FA Cup. So they could slot into that period, still allowing for this extra international period, but slotting it in at that point. Now, that could mean one of 2 things. It could mean that they go into double game week 23, because they would be then a late edition and they would happen obviously the weekend or a couple of weekends after this weekend's action. Or they could be absorbed into game week 24 and come in before the original scheduled fixtures, which that game week is due to kick off on the Tuesday. Now, obviously, that will make a difference to our planning, because suddenly if we have 2 games for the likes of Aston Villa and Leeds, that could massively change our plans. So we've already seen that this time around, if we go back just a second to the fixture scheduling, that Aston Villa this time out have a game against Everton, and Leeds this time around have a game against Newcastle. So they could then top that up with a game against each other, or it could slot into game week 24 potentially, and if that happens, then they would have 2 games against each other. So it'd be Aston Villa and Leeds and Aston Villa. Will be interesting to see how this all mashes out, but it's something that we need to consider. And obviously, Twitter is a very useful sounding board, and following the likes of Lego Mane over there is really useful, because if a double game week suddenly slots in, then maybe that makes them a more attractive option. And we've got the likes of Ollie Watkins and, of course, Coutinho, maybe even a cheeky shout on Luke Coutinho if you fancy. Danny Ings. There are potentially lots of good options there. And, of course, if Leeds get that double game week too, then Rafinha becomes a really nice, attractive option in whichever game week that it goes. Again, we could see if Watford and Burnley does go into game week 24, then a nice opportunity there to captain them. And of course, Watford versus Burnley and Watford versus Norwich would be a nice opportunity to captain one of those players too, if you have a look at the likes of Dennis and King. So something to just be aware of. Of course, as I'm recording this video, no firm news at all about whether the double game week may or may not happen. There is potential that it fits into that FA Cup weekend, and it would kind of make sense. However, nothing yet concrete and no understanding yet as to whether it's game week 22 or 23, if indeed it goes into that FA Cup weekend at all. So for now, I think the best option is to go with our Manchester City boys. They seem to be the most attractive options. Cheeky punts if you want to go for a differential captain, potentially on the likes of Dennis, maybe Rafinha or Lacazette. Of course, you could always go with Trent or Jota too against Crystal Palace, both of them looking like nice options. For me, at the moment, my captain's armband is sitting on Cancelo, with my vice-captain's armband at the moment on Jota. So I have covered both the games just in case anything untoward happens, but I do feel like Cancelo has got really nice potential to be our captain this week. Let me know in the comments below who you think is the best captaincy option for game week 23, and I will see you all later on in the week for another video. Thanks, guys.